everyone, and welcome to Realization Hub. My name is Michelle, and I'm an intuitive counselor, energy healer, channeler, and astrologer. And I love to bridge the gap between the unseen world of spirit, consciousness, energy, and intuition. Today's message is about more of a collective perspective on the United States, more of a astrological insights, intuitive insights about the United States and the current collective events that are happening right now. We have seen a lot over the last year since we've had a shift in administration. And especially this month, we have been like in a pressure cooker of an internal crisis happening. And so I've had some of you reach out to me asking for some insights about the United States. And so the reason why I'm doing this is to help provide some context as to where we are in this crisis, as well as some perspective about the energy of the United States, as well as some any intuitive, insights that may come in to support us at this time. And I'll be offering some more, I hope to offer some more messages about some of these transits that are happening this year that are just really major shifts for all of us collectively. But exciting shifts for us personally. It's um, the collective is screaming right now. So I just want to attend to what needs attention at the moment. And then, I'm going to bring it back down to us. But this particular recording is about collective energies. So take a deep breath in with me, if you will, and breathe out any fear, any anxiety. Okay, let's get started with just the United States here. I have the chart up, so if you're listening to me on YouTube or Spotify, you may be able to see the chart. I'm going to try to upload a video to Spotify to see how that goes. Um, but right now I'm looking at the United States chart, and the first thing I want to just point out about the United States chart is that, this is a country um, that is about freedom. Um, the ascendant, for example, is in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a fire sign. It's very mutable, active, sometimes chaotic energy, but it's very instinctual energy. And it embraces multiple cultures, multiple philosophies, different experiences, kind of going out on a journey and being free, to collect wisdom, to seek a higher purpose, to bring meaning to our experiences and to share and teach that, with others, And so when we think about the essence of the United States, we think about freedom and multiple cultures. This is a country that was built um, with a lot of different people from a lot of different cultures. It's like a melting pot of immigrants um, that all were seeking a dream. It's like the eagle that is flying in the sky. The American eagle is like the totem of the United States, and it has this dream, it has this vision as vast as the sky. And we are free to seek out that dream, and we are free to build that dream, within a container that is supposed to be democratic, that is supposed to be balanced, that is supposed to have two balanced, like a balanced government, like checks and balances around our law and around our order and around the groups and the councils and the different legislation and the different branches of government. There's supposed to be democracy, with that. And we see that with Saturn in Libra here in the United States chart. We see that there is a structure in the United States that is there to create balance, authority through balance, checks and balances. And we see even um, Juno, the goddess of partnership and marriage. We see commitment. We see long-term commitment. We see, partnerships. We see, branches of governments that are supposed to act as marriage partners, committed partnerships that take us through time, that are supposed to balance each other out, especially when it comes to authority. So this country is built in a way for the collective, for collective ideals, for humanitarian causes, and for checks and balances. The energy of this country is about freedom, multiple cultures. It's got a karmic duty. You can think about Saturn as like the karmic daddy. It's like that grandfather energy. It's the structure. It's the archetype. It's kind of like the soul's blueprint of the country and what we're built on, the legacy that we're here to have. Um, and it's built on democracy. It's meant for that. It's meant to have a container for balance and harmony and democracy and humanitarian reform. And we see that is in a trine to the moon in Aquarius, the body of the people, the way the people communicate and process and relate to each other as if we are all brothers and sisters, extended family. And in Aquarius, the people act as objective feedback, subjective feedback, but with it in Aquarius, it's like objective. Aquarius is objective, it's intellectual, it has a vision. And so this structure of democracy is linked to the people. It's linked to the people, the way the people have an envision to reform the structure of the government in the most supportive way, to take old forms of government and reform them and restructure them so that they're more um, in support of all, right? That's very Aquarius, in support of the group, in support of the system, in support of the people, right? And so that's the good news about the United States. That's the structure of the United States. That's the energy dynamic of the United States. And then we also have that trining Mars in Gemini. Gemini is about the different ways we see things, our perspectives, our dualistic perspectives, the conversations that we're having, the debates that we're having. We fight again. We fight, like the United States is a place where we debate, we fight, we are competing with our perspectives all the time. During election season, it's become like the show of the world, of where people are watching the United States elections because it sets the tone for um, a lot. It creates ripple effects. It's very impactful, and there's a constant passion and anger around those debates and competing and fighting for what we think. Fighting for what we think, fighting over facts and figures, different perspectives, how to see things, trying to listen and understand the way other people see things. Um, so we have that grand trine in the United States chart. This is an energy that we're constantly experiencing in the United States as the United States evolves. Now, the one thing I want to mention about the United States is that the sun is in Cancer in the United States in the eighth house. And so this is a country that has will have crisis. It's a country that will have transformation. It's a country that will have death and rebirth experiences. And, you know, it's a country that's that's rooted in shared resources and shared finances and debt and um, money and investments. And um, we also have Jupiter and Venus here with the sun. Generally speaking, the leader of the country, which can be signified by the sun, can sometimes be seen as a father or even a mother figure that's here to protect, um, people that are sensitive, to, sensitive groups of people like minorities or different kinds of people that need to be nurtured or cared for or protected, and that can fall under themes of the actual people within the United States or themes of other countries. Now, all of that can come into the lens of scrutiny, and we can really debate, you know, is that what they're doing? Is that not what they're doing? Like you think about these archetypes like the mother, the father, the leader, um, of the zodiac signs. You can think of them as archetypes. They all have conscious expressions of themselves, and they all have um, very unconscious expressions of themselves. They have light expressions, dark expressions, high expressions, low expressions. And so when you think about like a mother archetype or a father archetype, you can, on a personal level, you're very aware of what it's like to have a smothering mother, a mother who is deciding how we're going to nurture other people, or a father who decides how we're going to lay down the law and bring in authority. And, like we have personal experiences that help us understand those archetypes and how they play out personally, how they can be both benevolent and both awful at the same time. And so, without going into nuances and examples and scrutiny and debates, like all of this has a side to it that is conscious and beautiful, and we could see that in the United States. That's why a lot of us that live in the United States, that were born here, that moved here, that care about this country, a lot of us are either in shock or really destabilized or um, crying or grieving or enraged, angry, um, because those are all valid emotions to experience when a country is going through a crisis, when someone you love is going through a crisis, when something you love is going through a crisis. And um, what I want to say about this country is that, with the sun in the eighth house, it will go through cycles of transformation. It will go through cycles of transformation around money and finances, investments, shared resources, um, how we come together, our patriotism, our relationships, the news, the media, the way we communicate, all of that is in the eighth house, and so this country will always have natural cycles of death and rebirth. And that's the good news because we're right on time for that. This crisis that we're in right now is indicating transformation. Okay. That is how crisis, and that's how transformation begins. And it doesn't necessarily, crisis can show up in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be this picture of chaos and violence and disruptions and the world falling apart. Like, sure, sometimes crisis can look like the sky is falling, but crisis can be very psychological, right? And with the sun of the United States in the eighth house, the crisis will likely be a psychological crisis in the United States, an emotional crisis, a crisis of emotional intelligence, a crisis of how we protect those that we love, a crisis of psychology, a crisis of how we are um, healing from collective trauma. And I say this because we're right there right now. We're right there in a crisis. We're edging, if not already in crisis in the United States. Um, I think we all saw it come. I mean, at least a lot of us saw it coming. I mean, I think a lot of us saw it coming. But for those of us, let's say, that didn't see it coming, these are the people that are going to be very destabilized and freaking out. And so I just want to make a note to those of us that are bright, those of us that have survived our own cycles of trauma, abuse, narcissistic abuse, um, those of us that have done the healing work, those of us that have developed and are proficient and offer professional services. Maybe you are a healer, maybe you are an intuitive or a psychic, maybe you are a teacher. Maybe you teach art therapy, or you teach yoga, or you teach classes, or you are a mentor or a guide of some sorts. Maybe you're someone that is just spiritual, someone that hosts your own groups. Maybe you're someone that just loves following cycles. You're a star child, you love astrology, or maybe you're really connected to your body and nature and the earth, and you follow your menstrual cycles, or everyone is welcome here. Um, and we all have a very unique purpose in our lives personally. And at the same time, this is an incredible initiation and change and transformation happening on Earth at this time. In the United States, you can think of it as a type of leader. It has its sun sign in Cancer. It is like a cardinal sign. Cardinal signs are leaders. You could think of it as a big body of people that initiate, movements on a very intimate psychological level in the world. We bring reform together as sisters and brothers and extended family. We bring reform, we bring balance, we care about balance um, as a collective body of people and the impact we have on the world. And, we all have our unique purpose personally and collectively. And, this is just a time to deepen into your personal role. There's going to be a lot of pressure from the collective that's all going to be screaming at everyone to participate. And the thing is that we all do need to participate. This is but not necessarily the way people are screaming and demanding, some people are not capable of standing on their feet. They're crippled. Some people are sick. Some people do not have the mental balance to be involved in protests. Some people are not built for that. Some people, don't have the right skills to get involved in the political atmosphere. It just not everyone's built for um, for different roles in a revolution, different roles in a reform, I mean, different roles in a movement, right? Not everyone's built for one role. And that's what I'm trying to say. Like, we're not all built for one role. So take a deep breath in with me and just recognize, like, when I say we all are a part of the participation in reform and collective revolution, not just in the United States, but on a global level, we are participating. But as long as you're aligned with your purpose, you are participating in the way you impact your world, even if you're focused on your localized, um, your localized world. You have your own world. You are impactful in that world. The best service that you can do at this time is to really align with your path, your purpose here, your gifts, what you can share, um, the impact of what you share. It doesn't have to fit inside a box, and it doesn't have to be a role that the collective is going to be putting a lot of pressure on everyone to fit into. There are people that are born at this time that are here to fight, that are here to sacrifice, that are here to be um, spearhead new leadership, to get into the political system, to resist. There are people born to help people recover from trauma, like me. There are people that are born for different roles in this crisis, right? So I just want to bring that back to you and give you the power, you the empowerment to decide for yourself how you are participating consciously in your own life, in your own experience, and how that has impact on the collective right now, and why that's so important to tune into right now. Um, I want to now talk about the current transits because, boy, we're in some historical times. um, and I basically, like, in a nutshell, you know, we're showing some similar transits to the American Revolution and the Civil War. And so, but I also want to state that there are some differences in these transits. And so it's not going to be the same thing. We can look at historical patterns, we can see the way things have evolved, but we can't say this is what it's going to look like because we've already changed, we've already grown, we have some different things in the mix now that make this experience different. And it's going to be different. Um, so I really don't get into the games of prediction, especially now on Earth, because there's so much consciousness. And that just means potentials can really shift and change in spontaneous ways. Um, we can recognize patterns and consciousness can have us kind of step outside of probabilities into things that we can't see coming. So I don't fall into the game of predictions, but I do read energy in present time. I do look at what's happening energetically, and I do look to astrology as a wonderful way to, give us some structure around how to look at the energies. And I pulled up the Civil War chart. So the Civil War started on April 12th, 1861. And this was when Neptune was at almost 0 degrees of Aries. So, like, literally, it was moving into Aries. Okay. And the one thing I want to mention about, like, a pattern that's repeating is that the United States has a point in the chart called the IC. We all have this point, the IC. It's the most private part of our chart, but it's an energy of our foundations and the our ancestral lineage, right? And so when we think about the United States and its foundations and its ancestral lineage, it was founded, and it's an Aries, right? You can think about violence and you can think about self-interest and you can think about pioneering, right? We had people pioneer to the country, and there was violence, there was slaughtering of the Native Americans, there was overtaking of the land. That's, you can think of like a karmic trauma of the United States, right? And then, we continued to have themes that this country was built on that are just as violent and full of that kind of shadow side of self-interested leadership, like violence, minorities, slavery, abuse, authoritarian kind of hidden qualities over minorities. This country was a melting pot of immigrants. This country has been built on the backs of the people. Like there's definitely a story to the foundations of the United States. There's a story of violence. There's a story of blood. There's a story of stolen land. There's a story of, taking, stealing, um, using, right? It's kind of like that ugly shadow side of Aries. And then, the beautiful side of Aries is pioneering, new, unknown land, a new, a new country, a new body of a new container for people to exist in. A place that's supposed to be a container for manifesting your desires and your dreams, right? And so we have in the Civil War chart, we have Neptune was moving into Aries here. And then when I bring up the current transits, we have Neptune. Currently, I'm filming this on the 25th of January. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit lost. I'm meant for more intuitive work, not all the data kind of delivery. So that's why I get stuck and pause and confused. So yeah, the Neptune, same degree, it's about to move into Aries and it's going to be at 0 degrees. Now, this happened last year between March into the autumn. Um, we had Neptune go into Aries, and this is when we were introduced into the United States to tariffs. Neptune is associated with the economy and the tariffs that started to play out in the economy collectively, globally, right? As well as those protests around the National Guard being threatened in states in the United States, right? And we started to see for real like authoritarianism, just in action, like physically manifested authoritarian in action. We got introduced to that energy of Saturn in Aries because Saturn moved into Aries. It was like May 2025. And so throughout the summer, we experienced, those disruptions of protests, of threats of the National Guard, um, the authoritarian energy, right? We got introduced to that crisis and that hardship, right? Things around autumn of 2025, like Neptune and Saturn went back into Pisces. And, in February 20th, we are going to have, February 20th, we're going to have a conjunction with Neptune and Saturn um, on top of the IC. And so, again, we think about the IC being activated in the United States chart. This has to do with the foundations of the United States. This has to do with the ancestral history of the United States, okay, the kind of storyline. And that's why immigration, minorities, violence is all a theme that is really hot right now because it's getting activated. And it affects, um, it affects the public reputation of the United States. It affects our governments. Um, it affects the authority. It kind of affects everything because the IC is like, you can think of it as like a pillar in a birth chart, or like an angle, or like a bone in a birth chart. Like it's something that's going to impact other areas. When you have transits to one of these points, like the ascendant, the descendant, the midheaven, or the IC, it's something that affects it can affect multiple areas of life, right? You think about something that happens to you as a person, it can affect your relationship. Something that happens to your home, it can affect your career. Something happens in your career can affect your foundations. Like, it all kind of impacts each other. And when we see Neptune, let's start with Neptune. When Neptune moves into Aries, this is a transit that's similar to the Civil War. Um, but really, if we look at that energy, it's like we are going through a dissolving process around our ideals, on a foundational level in the United States. Our ideals, our dreams, our self-identity as a country is going through a dissolving process. We can no longer hold on to the fantasy of what the United States was. Instead, we are getting a reality check of, the shadow, the ugly side, the reality that we're currently in, and the crisis that we're currently in as a country, and the impact that has on the entire world. We're getting that type of reality check and exposure that helps us release illusions and delusions and fantasies about what this country is and the foundation of this country. We're all taking a big look at that, and we're like, whoa, you know, we've got to heal this. We've got to reform this. We have to change this. So the identity, you can think of like the identity of the country is going through a spiritual awakening, right? It's going through a transcendence. It's going through a dissolving and a healing process. We have got to bring compassion. We have got to bring forgiveness. We have got to look at this ancestral trauma, the land that this was built on, the karma around, especially with, Saturn moving into Aries. It's going to be conjunct the IC. Saturn has to do with karma as well. Like the karma of the land. This is like a karmic reckoning of the land. Saturn in Aries is also very authoritarian, and so we'll continue to see those themes. Um, we're going to get a pretty big reality check around authoritarianism, leaders of self-interest, a crisis playing out that's affecting everything. When you have a crisis involving cardinal signs, it's a crisis of initiation. It's a crisis of initiation. Um, a crisis of taking action, initiating action, a crisis of protection, a crisis of democracy, a crisis of um, authority, right? Stuff that we're seeing playing out very clearly. It's all being super exposed very clearly right now. Right, so this is the crisis. It's a crisis of initiation. It's a crisis of leadership. It's a crisis of balance and democracy and protecting those that we love. It's a crisis of old systems of authority that have suppressed the people. That's the crisis, right? So then we have Saturn moving into Aries, and that's going to be on February 20th here. And we're going to have, sorry, not February 20th. Saturn will move into Aries earlier than that, but there's going to be a conjunction on February 20th. Now, if you think about um, Saturn, Saturn as structure, Saturn as government, Saturn as authority. Um, we can think about Saturn as reality, Saturn as karma. I mean, this could play out in a lot of different ways because Neptune dissolves and Saturn rebuilds. We could see a form of dissolving or collapsing of structures, beliefs, ideologies, karma, um, authority figures. Is that going to be benevolent? Is that going to be like where we see the collapse of our democracy? Is that going to be where we see the collapse of an executive branch that's overstepping power? Are we going to see the collapse of an authority figure? Are we going to start to see, um, a collapse in our ideals, the reform, the initiation, going back to what I sense about this is that, with Pluto in Aquarius here and us approaching a nodal return in the United States, this is looking like it's very much up to the people to reform the government. It's very much up to the people to revolutionize and reform the government, and that there is obviously a crisis of authoritarianism that is threatening democracy. This is also playing out this year where we have Saturn going to be opposing Saturn in the United States chart, which means this is a karmic cycle. This is a karmic point in the cycle. It's an opposition. It's a rebalancing. It's a very difficult rebalancing of, leadership that has too much self-interest and actual balance in our legislation and partnerships that work together to create that balance and checks and balances in our legislation, right? And so this is a karmic cycle. This is a rebalancing point. This is a tension that's occurring this year. But around February, we see a form of collapse. Now, it does seem to be at a world point, at 0 degrees. That's a critical point. That's something that can affect something globally. There could be a historical event that actually plays out. It's on the IC of the United States. So this is the foundation of the United States, which was built on the land, the karmic land of, everything I've talked about before. Is it a moment where we get a very strong awakening in the United States, where we see a major crisis playing out, where we really start to dissolve any form of delusion or fantasy around being saved, having someone save us? This could possibly be quite the initiation where people really have to come together, take action towards change and reform together. This is not a situation where, we have something um, something really saving us. It's truly like a collective movement that creates reform. All of us working together to create reform. Now, having Saturn in Aries, Saturn is at its fall in Aries, and so that just means it is kind of a big mismatch for that energy. And so it can really bring out some negative qualities around Aries and Saturn. And, Saturn is going to be transiting through Aries for about 2 years. And so, likely we'll all feel that energy of being a bit under-resourced, in that rebalancing, in that overall rebalancing in the United States when it comes to our democracy and fairness and balance. and checks and balances, like, yeah, we're going to be feeling a bit under-resourced around that, where we're going to have to be tackling emergencies as they arise with not a lot of preparation and handling emergencies in haphazard ways, handling crises in haphazard ways, and not really having the time to prepare or organize as much. This is kind of going to be a theme over the next 2 years, but nonetheless, I do see intuitively like themes of um, absolutely like collective reform and groups of people coming together to have a revolution. And it's kind of that rebalancing between the people and the leaders, and who's in charge essentially. And the good news is there are some differences, with the Civil War and what's happening now. We had Pluto in Taurus. And so that was more of a transformation around, property, our bodies, and self-worth, and finances, financial security. And, that was all about slavery and bodies as property, right? And there was a transformation around that where we abolished slavery, and now, when we look at the current transits, um, we have Pluto in Aquarius, and Aquarius is more of a humanitarian sign. It's about reforming our systems, innovating them, oftentimes with technology, um, with change, to embrace a higher vision, so ultimately, I see this aligning in a direction where we have restructure and reform in the United States. But that is not going to happen effortlessly. It is not going to happen immediately, and it's not going to happen without collective participation. And I'm not just talking about people inside the United States. I mean, people inside the United States participate because they are within the system of the United States and they have certain access to participating in ways from the inside, right? But then we have people in different countries, people from, yeah, people from different countries, and they have a role too in collective reform and collective restructuring that's going on. That is different. It's what you can do from the outside of the crisis, you know. Um, the other thing that's going to be different about, the Civil War, yeah, with the Civil War we had Uranus and Gemini. Um, we also had Jupiter going to Leo. Now we're going to have Uranus going into Gemini this year. We're also going to have Jupiter going into Leo again this year. So again, what makes this different is that we have Pluto in Taurus. That was a war about slavery, bodies as property, land, resources. We also had Saturn in the 10th house in Virgo. This is about discernment, criticism, refining, organization around, the government, the executive government. Um, and this was approaching a Saturn return, right? So we were approaching, a Saturn return. By the end of the Civil War, I believe we had Saturn going through its Saturn return, which was, uh, the abolishment of slavery and the rebalancing in our relationships and in the government, after the abolishment of slavery, a new cycle, a new 30-year cycle. Um, And so now Saturn, is in a different placement. It's going to be in Aries. So it's going to be another karmic cycle, like I mentioned, but more of a rebalancing between leaders of self-interest and democracy. And so, yeah, Pluto will be in Aquarius. This lies in the United States chart with the moon, communication, thinking and learning, education, um, our subjective reality, how we think and process. Um, this is about reform, revolution, humanitarian efforts, innovation. Again, like all of this trines Saturn in the chart, this is going to be like a restructuring of the United States. Now, the last thing I'm going to say about this, just for perspective and context, is that, we could, I'm, this is a transformation, and so there's indications of collapse, in the foundations of the government. There's indication of crisis. There's indication of internal disputes, division, civil war-like patterns, as well as revolutionary, type patterns. I haven't studied the other charts. This is more like mundane astrology, and quite honestly, I don't study mundane astrology. So, before Trump was elected, in the summer of 2024, I did see a vision of the United States changing, like its borders changing, its regions changing, instead of it just being the 50 states all under one kind of federal democracy, with, state level governments. I saw what looked like new regions that were more sovereign, that had their own kind of governments. Um, So, when we think about transformation, um, there's a death and a rebirth experience, and that doesn't happen all at once. That happens over years. So this is going to be something that happens over years, and we're kind of at that point of collapse. We're kind of at that point of dis of the dispute where we have to start drawing new lines, right? We have to start drawing new lines. So we could see anything from states receding, from the United States. We could see states banding together and creating their own um, borders, their own boundaries, their own governments, their own military. I mean, we could see a total reform in the regions of the United States and how the United States functions as a whole. Is it even going to be the United States after this? Is it going to be called something different? We don't know. Um, so that's a vision that I had in 2024. And again, that's not facts, that's an intuitive insight. It doesn't necessarily mean that's literally going to happen. It could be more of a metaphor for the way we move through this experience. So don't take that as fact, take it as insight, take it as the energetics of what might be happening, right? And so this is more of like an insight into some major events. We're going to be coming into eclipse season. We're going to have that conjunction showing up on, February 20th. That could be a dissolving kind of collapse, kind of change in foundations, change in um, ideals, change in identity around the United States. Um, it is a type of crisis, that we're in, that we're rebalancing, recalibrating over the next couple years, especially. But, while the United States has Uranus and Gemini, we're going to be seeing that revolutionary energy for a while, with the North Node going into Aquarius this year. We're going to be seeing more of that humanitarianism. Um, developing. So these are some insights about the United States, the collective energies, and another good moment to just take a deep breath in because, this is more of a collective transformation occurring. This is just focused on the United States. I don't look at the charts for other countries. That's more of like mundane astrology, the study of historical events and countries and governments and things like that. And so if this is something you're interested in tracking and in other places, yeah, there's probably an awesome collection of mundane astrologers out there that focus on other countries as well, like Russia and um, China. They're tracking all of that, they're tracking all of that. They're tracking historical events, they're tracking patterns, it's like their full-time job, tracking those mundane historical events, so my focus is with helping people heal and go through their own transformation and step into their power and developing their gifts, so that they can navigate their lives more gracefully with more clarity and more balance, right? And that's why I wanted to do a session today about the United States. I just wanted to provide some context for where we're at and just remind you that we're going to be okay. This is an initiation for people in society to really show up and reform, the government, and you can expect to see more trends towards that. And a good time to, reconnect to yourself if you lose connection to yourself. Come up with some good practices that you can do to regain connection to yourself. I offer group sessions every month. There's like at least three sessions that you can show up for each month, very low cost, that you can just sit back and receive or follow along. It doesn't require you to learn any tools. It doesn't require you to work with me one-on-one. It does not require you to have taken classes with me. These are sessions where you can, reset your energy, come back to you, come back to your personal experience. That's going to be very important. There's going to be a lot of collective pressure, especially this year and next year. Um, and It's going to be very important not just to ignore the collective, but to be aware of what's happening in the collective, but to most importantly be in tune with you and align with you, because that's where you can be most effective in this experience. Okay, I love you so much. If you want to give me a big psychic hug, make sure that you subscribe to YouTube, my YouTube channel, and hit the notification bell. My YouTube channel was shadow banned over a year ago, and I'm not doing anything about it because it's just, honestly, we're having some major restrictions on our rights in the United States. So I'm not even going to try to create a new channel right now, or to figure that out under this situation. So if you want to be informed when I post a new video on YouTube, please subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. I do just send monthly newsletters, so I would also recommend that you sign up for my monthly newsletter. It's just one newsletter a month where I share the details about my group events. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm also on Threads. You can follow me there. I did start an account on TikTok. I'm probably going to delete that given the change of ownership and the sketchiness of that. And so I'm going to continue to think of ways where I can, you know, extend my reach. To people who want to connect and enjoy these experiences. If you're listening on Spotify, definitely give Spotify a rating, please. Like, comment, and share with people. That would be very supportive to me. And I'm giving you a big hug, and we're going to be okay. And I love you guys. Okay.